You are holding a piece of paper. It is heavy cardstock. Maybe it has a gold seal on it. Maybe it's framed on your wall, or maybe it's buried in a drawer under old receipts and charging cables. Look at it. Really look at it. You spent 4 years of your life for this. You spent thousands of dollars, or your parents did, or you signed away your future income to a bank for this. You missed sleep for this. You stressed over finals for this. You were told, from the moment you could walk, that this piece of paper was the golden ticket. That this was the barrier between the haves and the have-nots. That if you just got this, you would be safe. You would be set. And now you are sitting in a plastic chair in a waiting room, or staring at an inbox full of automated rejection emails, and you are realizing something that makes your stomach turn. You are realizing that the golden ticket is a receipt, and it's a receipt for a product that doesn't work. Let's go back to that moment in the interview. You know the one. You're wearing the uncomfortable clothes. You've rehearsed your answers. You're sitting across from someone who looks tired, someone who has seen 50 people just like you this week, and they ask you a simple question. Not a theoretical question. Not a define X question. They ask you to solve a real problem. They ask you how you would handle a crisis. They ask you to demonstrate value, and your mind goes blank, because you don't know how to solve problems. You know how to memorize definitions of problems. You know how to write essays about problems. You know how to cite sources who solved problems 50 years ago. But you have never actually done the thing. You have the theory. You have the vocabulary. You have the grades. But in that room, under those fluorescent lights, you realize that you're 4. 0 GPA means absolutely nothing to the market. The market does not care about your grades. The market cares about what you can produce, and you have spent 2 decades being trained to consume, not to produce. This is the opening wound. It's the gap between what you were sold and what you actually bought. You were sold a key to the city. You bought a participation trophy. Think about the betrayal of that moment. You did everything right. You followed the rules. You didn't skip class. You did the extra credit. You were the good kid. You deferred your life, your earnings, and your happiness for 4, 5, 6 years, banking on this promise. And now you're out here in the cold, and you're realizing that the world works on a completely different operating system than the one they installed in your head. You feel stupid. You feel like you missed a memo. You look around and see people who dropped out, people who started businesses, people who learned a trade, and they are moving faster than you. They are buying houses while you are calculating if you can afford to go out for dinner. And a voice in the back of your head whispers the most terrifying thought of all. Was it all a waste? Stop. Don't push that thought away. Let it sit there. You are entering the workforce with a skill set that was designed for a world that ceased to exist in 1990. You are bringing a knife to a gunfight, but it's worse than that. You're bringing an essay about the history of knives to a drone strike. You are theoretically intelligent and practically useless. This hurts to hear. I know it hurts. You want to defend your degree. You want to talk about critical thinking and the college experience and networking. You want to justify the sunk cost. But deep down, you know the truth. If you had to start a business today purely on what you learned in that classroom, you would starve. If you had to navigate a lawsuit, manage a tax audit, or invest a portfolio based solely on your university curriculum, you would be bankrupt in a month. You have been scammed. That is the only word for it. If you bought a car that didn't run, you'd call it a scam. If you bought a house that collapsed the moment you walked in, you'd call it a fraud. But you bought an education that didn't educate you on how to survive, and you call it prestige. You are walking around with a toolbox full of tools that don't fit any of the bolts in the real world. You know the Pythagorean theorem, but you don't know how to leverage debt. You know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but you don't know how inflation eats your savings. You know who won the War of 1812, but you don't know how to negotiate a salary. The gap is intentional. It's not an accident that you feel this way. It's not a glitch in the system. It is the system. You were not trained to be the master of your life. You were trained to be a cog in someone else's machine. And the moment you stepped off that stage with that diploma in your hand, you weren't stepping into freedom. You were stepping into a reality that you are completely, utterly unprepared for. And the people who sold you that ticket, they already cashed your check. This didn't start in college. College was just the final coat of paint on a structure that was built when you were 5 years old. Look back at the architecture of your childhood. Really look at the physical space you occupied for 12 years. You walk into a square room. You sit in a row of desks. You look at the back of someone's head. You look at a clock on the wall, and you wait for a bell to ring. Think about the bell. It is the most pervasive sound of your youth. And what did it train you to do? When the bell rings, you stop what you are doing. It doesn't matter if you were in a flow state. It doesn't matter if you were just starting to understand a complex concept. It doesn't matter if you were passionate about the project. The bell rings. You stop. You pack up. You move to the next room. You start a completely different task. This is not how humans learn. This is not how creativity works. But do you know what this is? This is exactly how a shift change works on an assembly line. You were being conditioned from the age of 6 to respect the schedule over the work, to respect the external signal over your internal curiosity. You were being trained to be interrupted. Now, remember the hand raising. You are 7 years old. You need to use the restroom, a basic biological function. Your body is telling you something urgent, but you don't go. You raise your hand. You sit there, squirming, waiting for an authority figure to acknowledge you, waiting for someone else to give you permission to take care of your own body. May I go to the bathroom? And sometimes they said no. Wait until the break. You should have gone during recess. Do you understand what that did to your psyche? It broke your connection to your own instincts. It taught you that your needs are secondary to the institution's convenience. It taught you that autonomy is a privilege granted by a superior, not a right you possess. You are an adult now, and you still feel a twinge of guilt when you leave your desk at 10 a.m. You still feel like you need to explain yourself. That is the conditioning. That is the software running in the background. Consider the correct answer. You are taking a test. There is a question. You know the answer is nuanced. You know the situation is complex, but you also know that if you write the nuance, you get marked wrong. There is one specific phrase the teacher is looking for. There is one specific bubble you need to fill in, so you stop thinking. You start guessing. What do they want me to say? You become a mind reader for authority. You stop searching for truth and start searching for approval. You learn that being right means regurgitating the data exactly as it was given to you. Deviation is failure. Originality is risky. Compliance is safe. You carried this pattern for years. Sit down. Shut up. Face front. Don't talk to your neighbor. That's cheating. In the real world, talking to your neighbor is called collaboration. It's how businesses are built. It's how problems are solved. But in school, collaboration was a crime. You had to do it alone, in silence, with your eyes on your own paper. Isolation was enforced. This wasn't an education system. It was an obedience filter. They graded you on your ability to sit still. They graded you on your ability to memorize facts that you could have looked up in 3 seconds. They graded you on your willingness to suppress your natural energy. The kids who couldn't sit still, the ones who had too much energy, the ones who questioned why they had to learn this, they were medicated. They were put in detention. They were labeled problem students. But look at who runs the world now. Often it's those problem students, because they rejected the programming. You were the good student. You sat still. You memorized the dates of the battles. You raised your hand, you waited for the bell. You internalized the factory setting so perfectly that you don't even see the bars anymore. You think you are free, but you are still waiting for permission. You are waiting for a boss to tell you what to do. You are waiting for a syllabus for your life. You are waiting for someone to grade your performance. You are terrified of making a mistake because for 18 years, a mistake meant a red pen and a lower rank. You were built to be a worker bee. Efficient, compliant, replaceable. The system didn't fail you. The system worked exactly as it was designed to. It produced a perfect employee who is too afraid to question the wages, too afraid to question the hours, and too afraid to walk away. Let's take an inventory of your mind. Let's dump out the contents of your brain on the table and see what we find. There's the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You remember the rhythm of it. You can probably still sing the song. There's the preamble to the Constitution. There's the molecular structure of water. There's the plot summary of To Kill a Mockingbird. There's the date of the Battle of Hastings. Now, look for the tax code. Look for the definition of compound interest. Look for the clause in an employment contract that says they own your intellectual property. Look for the laws regarding tenant rights when your landlord refuses to fix the heat. Empty. It's all empty. This is the great omission. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is the most glaring, suspicious hole in your entire upbringing. You spent approximately 25,000 hours in a classroom. That is 3 full years of your life, counting every second. In 25,000 hours, they taught you how to analyze the symbolism of a green light in a novel, but they did not spend 1 single hour teaching you how money works. Think about the absurdity of that. Money is the tool you will use every single day for the rest of your life. It determines where you live, what you eat, the quality of your health care, your stress levels, and your freedom. It is the oxygen of the modern world, and the education system treated it like a dirty secret. You graduated knowing that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But you didn't know that inflation is the silent killer of your wealth. You learned how to find X in an equation, but you didn't learn how to find the hidden fees in a loan agreement. You learned how to diagram a sentence. But you didn't learn how to read a balance sheet. You walk into a bank to ask for a loan. The banker slides a stack of papers across the desk. It's written in a language that looks like English but reads like legal encryption. "Sign here," he says, and you sign. You sign because you don't want to look stupid. You sign because you trust the institution. You sign because you have no framework to evaluate what you are actually agreeing to. In that moment, you are a sheep signing a contract with a wolf, and the school system served you up on a platter. By keeping you financially illiterate, the system ensures you remain dependent. If you understood how tax brackets worked, you might structure your income differently. If you understood how the banking system creates money, you might not be so eager to go into debt. If you understood the legal system, you might not be so easily intimidated by a cease and desist letter. But you don't know these things. You operate on superstition and hearsay. You take financial advice from broke relatives and legal advice from Twitter. You are navigating a minefield blindfolded, while the people who designed the minefield are watching from the sidelines, taking bets on when you'll blow up. It's not just money, it's survival. You were taught to be a specialist in subjects that don't matter and a complete novice in the mechanics of existence. You know how to write a 5-paragraph essay, but do you know how to sell? Do you know how to persuade a human being to give you what you want? No. Because sales was considered crass. Persuasion was manipulative. So you enter the job market with zero ability to sell yourself, and you wonder why the person with half your IQ but double your charisma gets the promotion. You know the scientific method. But do you know how to manage your own psychology? Do you know how to handle rejection? Do you know how to regulate your emotions when you lose a client? No, they didn't have a class for that. They just told you to pay attention. The curriculum wasn't designed to make you competent. It was designed to make you Trivial Pursuit champion. You are filled with data, but starved of wisdom. You are a walking encyclopedia of useless facts, standing in the middle of a financial hurricane without an umbrella. And the worst part, you were proud of it. You were proud of that in history. You showed it to your parents. You put it on the fridge. You didn't realize that while you were memorizing the dates of dead kings, the living kings of the banking system were designing the debt products that would enslave you for the next 30 years. You were busy looking at the blackboard. You should have been looking at the ledger. Have you ever walked past a prison? High walls, long corridors, ringing bells to signal movement, assign numbers, a strict hierarchy of authority, a uniform code of conduct, surveillance. Now, look at your high school. The architectural blueprint is identical, and I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that quite literally, the design of the modern school was borrowed from the design of the factory and the penal colony. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is history. And it is the history of why you feel trapped. To understand why your degree is worthless, you have to understand where it came from. The system you just spent 2 decades inside wasn't designed by educators who wanted to unlock the human soul. It wasn't designed by artists who wanted to foster creativity. It was imported from Prussia in the 18th century. The Prussians had a problem. They had lost a war against Napoleon. They decided the reason they lost was that their soldiers were thinking for themselves. They were too independent. So they designed a school system with a very specific goal: to create obedient soldiers, soldiers who would march when told to march, shoot when told to shoot, and not ask why. They needed a population that was smart enough to read the manual, but not smart enough to write it. This model, the Prussian model, was so effective at creating compliant, standardized humans that American industrialists fell in love with it. In the early 1900s, men like John D. Rockefeller didn't need a nation of philosophers. They didn't need a nation of entrepreneurs. They needed a nation of factory workers. They needed people who could show up at 8 o'clock a.m., stand at a conveyor belt for 12 hours, do a repetitive task without complaining, and go home tired. They explicitly said it. The General Education Board, founded by Rockefeller, issued a statement in 1906. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. Read that again. We shall not try to make these people into men of learning. You were not the customer of the education system. You were the product. The customer was the industrialist who needed a worker who wouldn't cause trouble. The system was designed to crush your individuality because individuality is inefficient on an assembly line. An assembly line needs identical parts. It needs standardization. If you are a cog that is too big or too small or shaped differently, you jam the machine. So school became a process of sanding down your edges. You were a creative child. You were told to stop daydreaming. You were a high-energy child. You were told to sit still. You were a questioning child. You were told to be quiet. They rewarded the students who could repeat the teacher's opinion back to them. They punished the students who challenged the premise. They created a feedback loop where intelligence was redefined as compliance. This is why you feel that deep, gnawing anxiety when you don't have a roadmap. This is why you are terrified of starting a business. Because for 18 years, you were conditioned to believe that survival depends on following instructions. The Prussian model worked. It successfully stripped you of your agency. You are walking around with a 19th century software update installed in your brain. You are prepared for a world of steam engines and coal mines, but you live in a world of AI, remote work, and rapid innovation. The economy has evolved. The system has not. Your degree is not a certificate of competence. It is a certificate of compliance. It proves that you can show up, follow orders, tolerate boredom, and jump through hoops for 4 years without quitting. That is valuable to a corporate overlord who wants a drone. But it is useless to you if you want to be free. You are a victim of successful engineering. You were built to serve a master who is now dead, in an economy that no longer exists. And until you realize that the factory walls are in your head, you will never walk out of the gate. It is easy to blame the system. It is easy to blame the government, the banks, the universities, and the recruiters. It feels good to point the finger at the Prussian model and say, "They did this to me." But that's only half the truth, and we aren't here for half-truths. We are here for the uncomfortable reality. The uncomfortable reality is that you let them do it. In fact, you begged them to do it. You lined up for it. You paid for the privilege of being processed. Why? Because you are addicted to safety, or rather, the illusion of safety. Human beings have a deep, primal terror of the unknown. We are biologically wired to fear the dark, the wilderness, the path that hasn't been cut yet. The education system offered you something that the real world never could, a guarantee. If you do X, you will get Y. It was a contract. A simple, linear, predictable contract. Turn in the homework, get the grade. Get the grade, get the diploma. Get the diploma, get the job. Get the job, get the life. You bought the degree because you wanted to outsource your anxiety. You didn't want to wake up every morning and ask, "What should I do today to survive?" That question is terrifying. That question requires total responsibility. Instead, you wanted a syllabus. You wanted someone else to tell you what chapter to read. You wanted a roadmap. Even if the map was wrong, even if the map led directly into a swamp, it felt better to hold a map than to stand alone in the woods without one. And let's talk about your parents. We have to talk about them. They love you. They truly do. But their love was weaponized against you. Picture the kitchen table. You're 17. You're talking about maybe taking a gap year, or maybe trying to start that video editing business, or maybe just working for a while. And you see the look in their eyes. It's not anger. It's panic. They lived through recessions. They lived through layoffs. To them, no degree equals destitution. They projected their trauma onto your future. They handed you the strategy that worked in 1985 and told you it was the only way to survive in 2025. Just get the piece of paper, they said. It's a backup plan. It's something to fall back on. So you went. Not because you were hungry for knowledge, not because you wanted to master a craft. You went to make them sleep better at night. You went to stop the questions at Thanksgiving dinner. You went because being the kid who isn't going to college felt like social suicide. You fell for the social proof bias. You looked around and everyone was doing it. The smart kids, the rich kids, the cool kids. Everyone was marching toward the cliff. And the evolutionary part of your brain whispered, if the herd is going that way, it must be safe. You didn't want to be the straggler. You didn't want to be the outcast. So you took on $50,000 of debt to buy a membership card to the club of normal people. You bought the degree because you are afraid of your own potential. If you try to start a business and fail, that's on you. That proves you weren't good enough. That hurts. But if you get a degree and can't find a job, well, that's the economy. That's the market. That's bad luck. You can play the victim. The university system gave you a socially acceptable place to hide from the real world for 4 years. It was an expensive daycare for young adults who weren't ready to face the brutality of the marketplace. You partied. You studied a little. You found yourself. And you put the difficult questions of survival on a credit card to be paid later. Well, it's later now. The bill has arrived. The tragedy is that you traded your most valuable asset, your youth, your energy, your plasticity, for a promise that was broken before the ink was dry. You sought safety, and in doing so, you made yourself incredibly vulnerable. You are like a zoo animal that has been fed by keepers its entire life. You feel safe in the cage, but now the keepers have stopped coming. The gate is open. You are free, but you have forgotten how to hunt. And you are looking at the open savanna not with excitement, but with terror. You bought the lie because the lie was comfortable. The truth, that no one is coming to save you, that there is no syllabus, that you are entirely on your own, was too cold to handle. So you wrapped yourself in a diploma and pretended it would keep you warm. Let's look at the actual mechanics of what you spent 4 years doing. I want to give it a name so you can recognize it every time you see it. It's called just-in-case learning. The entire philosophy of formal education is built on the idea of hoarding information. You fill your backpack with random objects, a compass, a protractor, a definition of a dangling participle, the history of the Peloponnesian War, because someone, somewhere, decided that maybe, 10 years from now, you might encounter a situation where you need that specific fact. It is intellectual doomsday prepping. You are stuffing your brain with non-perishable goods, hoping that one day there will be a specific crisis that requires you to know the atomic weight of boron. But here is the problem. Information has a shelf life, especially now. You sat in a marketing class in 2019. You learned the 4 P's of marketing. You learned about television ad buys. You learned about print media strategies. You took a test. You got an A. Fast forward to today. That information isn't just old, it is actively wrong. The algorithm changed. The platforms changed. The consumer psychology changed. AI happened. The strategies you paid thousands of dollars to memorize are now relics. You bought a map of a city that has since been bulldozed and rebuilt. The professor who taught you, he hasn't run a marketing campaign since 2005. He has tenure. He is protected from the market. He is teaching you the history of the thing, not the thing itself. He is teaching you how to ride a horse while the rest of the world is learning to fly jets. This is the theory trap. You have been trained to believe that learning happens before doing. First I learn, then I do. First I get the degree, then I start the job. First I read the book, then I write the code. This is a lie. In the real world, this is a recipe for paralysis. Successful people operate on a completely different system, just-in-time learning. They don't hoard information. They hunt for it. They wait until they have a problem, and then they find the specific solution to that specific problem. They don't study business law for a semester. They start a business, get sued, and learn exactly what they need to know to survive that lawsuit that afternoon. The difference is retention. When you learn something just in case, your brain discards it because it has no relevance to your survival. That's why you forgot 90% of what you learned in college 2 weeks after the final exam. Your brain is smart. It dumps the trash. When you learn something just in time, you never forget it, because the knowledge was tied to pain. It was tied to a result. You needed to know how to fix the server right now because the website was down and you were losing money. That lesson burns into your DNA. You have spent your life acting like a tourist, reading a guidebook about Paris in a library in Ohio. You've memorized the street names. You know the history of the Eiffel Tower. You feel like you know Paris, but you have never smelled the bread. You have never navigated the metro when it's on strike. You have never had to order a coffee in broken French while a waiter glares at you. You are a theoretical swimmer. You have read every book on hydrodynamics. You know the physics of buoyancy. You can write an essay on the front crawl, but if I push you into the deep end of the pool right now, you will drown, because you don't know the feeling of the water. You don't know the panic of not being able to breathe. You don't know the muscle memory required to keep your head up. The world is full of people who are drowning while clutching their textbooks. They are screaming, but I studied the theory. I know how this is supposed to work. The water doesn't care. The market doesn't care about your theory. The market only cares if you can swim. And you just realized that you spent 4 years practicing your strokes on dry land. Let's talk about the specific mechanics of the scam. We need to look at the silence. Sherlock Holmes once solved a case not by what happened, but by what didn't happen. The dog that didn't bark. The silence was the clue. Look at your education. 12 years of primary school, 4 years of university, thousands of lessons, and in all that time the dog never barked. The subject of money was never raised. Do you really think that was an accident? Do you think the curriculum designers just forgot to include the one tool you will use every single day until you die? Do you think they made room for igneous rocks and isosceles triangles, but just ran out of time to explain how taxes work? No. The omission is the agenda. If you understand how money works, you become difficult to exploit. If you understand how money works, you don't take the predatory loan. You don't stay in the dead-end job just for the benefits. You don't accept a 2% raise when inflation is 7%. The system relies on your financial illiteracy. The economy needs a permanent class of debtors to keep the wheels turning. They need you to be bad with money. They need you to be anxious. They need you to live paycheck to paycheck, because people who live paycheck to paycheck are obedient. They don't strike. They don't quit. They don't start competitors. They keep their heads down and they work. Let's look at the concepts they hid from you. First, inflation. They taught you basic math. $100 is $100. That is a lie. In the real world, money is like an ice cube sitting on the counter. It is melting every second. While you were in class learning about the gold standard of the 19th century, the government was printing trillions of dollars, diluting the value of the cash in your pocket. They taught you to be a good saver. Put your money in the bank, they said. But they didn't tell you that the bank pays you 0.5% interest, while inflation eats 6%, 7%, or 10% of your purchasing power. By following their advice, by being responsible, you are literally losing wealth every single day. You are running on a treadmill that is moving backwards, and you don't even know who pressed the button. Second, taxes and GST. You are about to start a job. You think you agreed to a salary of $60,000. You didn't. You have a silent partner. Before that money even touches your hands, the government takes its cut. Income tax, Social Security, Medicare. Then when you go to spend what's left, they hit you again. GST, VAT, sales tax. You are taxed when you earn and you are taxed when you spend. Did anyone teach you the difference between a W-2 and a 1099? Did anyone teach you what a write-off is? Did anyone explain that the tax code is actually a series of incentives for business owners, not employees? No, they trained you to be an employee. Employees pay the highest taxes and have the fewest options. Business owners and investors play by a completely different set of rules, rules that are public, but were never assigned to you as reading material. Third, the banking system. You think the bank is a vault where they keep your money. Wrong. The bank is a casino that gambles with your money, keeps the profits, and socializes the losses. They lend your money out to other people at 18% interest, credit cards, pay you 0% for it, and then charge you a fee if your balance drops too low. They didn't teach you about fractional reserve banking. They didn't teach you that money is debt. They didn't teach you that the entire system is a game of musical chairs, and you are the one without a seat. You are walking through a financial minefield blindfolded. You see 0% APRA for 12 months, and you think it's a gift. It's not a gift, it's a trap. You see a minimum payment, and you think that's the bill. It's not the bill, it's the shackles. They sent you into the world knowing how to dissect a frog, but not how to dissect a mortgage contract. They sent you into the world knowing the periodic table, but not the amortization schedule. This is why you feel like you can never get ahead. You're playing a game against grandmasters, and you don't even know the rules. You are moving your pawn forward one square at a time, thinking you're making progress while they are clearing the board. And the hardest pill to swallow. You paid them to keep you ignorant. You paid tuition to be blinded. Let's go back to the scene of the crime. You were 18 years old. You weren't allowed to buy a beer. You weren't allowed to rent a car. You weren't trusted with the keys to a hotel room. The law decided that your brain was not developed enough to handle the responsibility of a $5 vodka shot. But that same system handed you a pen and said, "Sign here for $40,000. And another $40,000 next year, and the year after that. And you signed. Of course you signed. Everyone told you it was good debt. They told you it was an investment in your future. They compared it to a mortgage as if a degree is a house you can live in or sell. It is not a house. You cannot sell your BA in psychology when the market crashes. You cannot foreclose on your diploma and walk away. This debt is special. It is the only debt in the modern world that follows you to the grave. You can declare bankruptcy on a business failure. You can declare bankruptcy on credit card debt. But student loans, they are stuck to you like a parasite. They are immune to bankruptcy. Welcome to modern indentured servitude. In the 17th century, if you wanted to cross the ocean to the New World but couldn't afford the ticket, you signed an indenture contract. You agreed to work for a master for 7 years for free to pay off your passage. During those 7 years, you were property. You couldn't quit. You couldn't leave. Look at your life right now. How is it different? You are working a job you hate to pay for a ticket you already used. You are sending a chunk of your paycheck every month to a faceless servicer to pay off the interest on a decision you made when you were a teenager. You cannot quit your job to start a business because you have the payment. You cannot take a risk because you have the payment. You cannot travel because you have the payment. You are not free. You are an asset on a bank's balance sheet. And here is the darkest part. You started your life with negative equity. Most people start at 0. 0 is a beautiful number. If you have 0, you are free. You can do anything. But you started at negative $50,000, negative $80,000. You have to work for 5, 10, maybe 15 years just to get back to 0, just to get to the starting line. You are running a race where you have been handicapped before the gun even went off. While the uneducated plumber is building wealth from day one, you are digging yourself out of a hole that was dug for you by your guidance counselor. This creates the sunk cost fallacy, the psychological trap that keeps you in the cage. You're 2 years into a degree or 3 years into a career path and you realize, I hate this. Your soul is screaming. You know it's wrong. You know this isn't who you are, but then you look at the loan balance. I can't quit now, you say. I've invested too much. I have to use the degree, otherwise the debt was for nothing. So you double down. You spend more time in a life you hate to justify the money you already spent. You throw good years after bad money. You become a prisoner of your own past investment. The debt forces you to be safe. It forces you to be compliant. You can't speak up in the meeting because you need the paycheck to feed the loan. You become risk-averse. You become domesticated. This was the design. A population with no debt is dangerous. They are hard to control. They can say no. A population drowning in student debt is docile. They will do whatever you tell them to do, for as long as you tell them to do it, just to keep the wolves away. You didn't just buy a degree. You bought a ball and chain. And you are dragging it into every room, every interview, and every relationship. You think you're an adult. No, you're a debtor. And until that balance hits zero, the bank owns your Tuesdays. We have spent the last 20 minutes dismantling the villains of this story. We have blamed the banks, the government, the Prussian ghosts, the recruiters, and the parents. But there is one villain left. And this is the part where most people turn off the video. This is the part where you get defensive. Stand up. Go to the mirror. Look at yourself. You are the accomplice. You didn't just get scammed. You wanted to be scammed. You walked into the trap with your eyes wide open because the trap offered you something your ego desperately craved. Status. Admit it. You like saying you went to university. You like the hoodie with the logo. You like the sticker on your back windshield. You like the feeling of being educated. You were raised in a culture that taught you to look down on the people who actually built the world you live in. You look down on the plumber. You look down on the electrician. You look down on the guy selling used cars. I'm not a laborer, you whispered to your ego. I am an intellectual. I am a professional. Well, here is the uncomfortable truth. That plumber owns his house. That electrician has zero debt and a waiting list of clients. That car salesman makes your annual salary in a bad quarter. While you were writing essays about the socio-economic implications of 19th century literature, they were learning how to solve problems that people pay money to fix. You bought prestige with money you didn't have to impress people who don't care about you. You traded your financial freedom for a sense of superiority. And now, you are the smartest broke person in the room. You have the vocabulary of a philosopher and the bank account of a teenager. But it goes deeper than status. It's about fear. You used school as a hiding place. The real world is a jungle. It is chaotic, unfair, and brutal. In the jungle, you only eat what you kill. There are no grades, no syllabuses, and no for effort. That terrified you. So you retreated to the sanctuary of the classroom. The classroom is safe. The rules are clear. If you do X, you get Y. It is a controlled environment. You spent 4 years preparing for life instead of living it. You used your degree as a shield to delay the onset of adulthood. I'm not unemployed, you told yourself. I'm a student. It was a socially acceptable way to procrastinate. You chose the comfort of the library over the chaos of the marketplace. You chose to be a consumer of knowledge rather than a producer of value. And in doing so, you committed the ultimate crime against yourself. You murdered your own curiosity. Remember when you were 5? You asked why about everything. You wanted to know how the radio worked. You wanted to know why the sky was blue. You were a learning machine. Then you entered the system, and you stopped asking why. You started asking, will this be on the test? You became a transactional learner. You stopped caring about the truth. You only cared about the grade. You learned to game the system. You learned to parrot back what the teacher wanted to hear. You turned your brain into a hard drive for other people's data. You didn't want an education. You wanted a stamp of approval. You wanted a daddy figure to pat you on the head and tell you that you are a good boy or a good girl. Well, daddy is gone. The teacher is gone. The syllabus is gone. And now you are standing in the middle of the arena holding a piece of paper, waiting for someone to tell you what to do next. But nobody is coming. You are complicit in your own helplessness. You handed them the knife. You bared your throat. You trusted the system because you were too lazy to build your own path. It hurts to hear this. Good. It should hurt. The pain means the anesthesia is wearing off. The pain means you are finally waking up. You have been a willing participant in the theft of your own potential. But now that you see it, Now that you really see your own role in this mess, you have a power you didn't have 5 minutes ago. You can stop playing the victim. You can stop waiting for the refund that isn't coming. You can stop blaming the Prussian model. You are the only one who can tear up the contract. So here we are, the end of the line. The uncomfortable silence after the shouting stops. You have two choices. And this is not a false dichotomy. This is a binary switch that will determine the trajectory of the next 40 years of your life. Option A, the waiting room. You can keep doing what you're doing. You can keep polishing that resume. You can keep applying for jobs that don't exist. You can keep complaining about the economy. You can keep waiting for the system to apologize. You can keep paying the minimum on your loans and hoping for forgiveness. If you choose this, you will rot. You will become bitter. You will be the person at the bar at age 45, talking about how the system is rigged and how you never got a break. You will be a spectator in your own life, watching other people win while you clutch your diploma like a security blanket that has grown threadbare and cold. Option B, the pirate ship. You realize that the cavalry is not coming. You realize that the degree is a sunk cost. It's gone. The money is gone. The time is gone, and you decide to educate yourself. This is the shift from schooling to education. They are not the same thing. Mark Twain said it. I never let my schooling interfere with my education. Your schooling is over. Your education begins today. And this time, you are the dean. You are the professor. You are the administration. You need to build a new curriculum. A curriculum based on survival, not theory. A curriculum based on value, not prestige. Here is your syllabus for the rest of your life. 1. Learn to sell. I don't care if you are an artist, a coder, or a nurse. If you cannot persuade others to value your work, you will starve. Read Cialdini. Study negotiation. Learn how to look someone in the eye and ask for money without apologizing. Sales is not dirty. Sales is the transfer of belief. If you don't believe in yourself enough to sell yourself, why should anyone else buy? 2. Learn the language of money. Stop hiding from your bank account. Open the spreadsheet. Learn what an asset is. Learn what a liability is. Learn how taxes work. Learn how to invest. Stop listening to your broke uncle and start reading the people who actually have wealth. Money is a game. If you don't learn the rules, you will always be the loser. 3. Learn to build. The world rewards creation. It does not reward regurgitation. Can you code? Can you write copy? Can you weld? Can you edit video? Can you build a community? The market pays for skills, not credentials. A portfolio of real work is worth infinitely more than a transcript of good grades. Show me what you have done, not what you have learned. 4. Learn to fail. School taught you that failure is final, that an F is a mark of shame. In the real world, failure is data. Failure is the tuition you pay for success. You need to go out and fail. You need to get rejected. You need to launch the project that nobody watches. You need to lose money on an investment. Because every scar is a lesson that a textbook could never teach you. The gatekeepers are dead. 30 years ago, you needed a degree to get past the gatekeeper. You needed the institution to give you permission to broadcast, to publish, to build. Today, the gate is wide open. You have a printing press in your pocket, your phone. You have a broadcasting tower in your bedroom, the internet. You have access to the sum of human knowledge for free. You can learn physics from MIT professors on YouTube. You can learn marketing from billionaires on Twitter. You can learn coding from a 12-year-old in Pakistan. The information is free. The only thing missing is your will. Your degree is worthless. Fine. Accept it. Frame it. Hang it on the wall as a reminder of the time you bought a lie, and then walk away from it. You are not your major. You are not your GPA. You are not your debt. You are a terrifyingly free agent in a world that is desperate for competence. The system was designed to make you a sheep. But the fence is down. The dog is asleep, and the forest is waiting. Run.